is the Now Morning Show, and I have with me Dr. Nyan Gadsby-Dolly, newly minted Minister of Education, who's joining us, particularly as the school term is about to start with orientation this week from September 1st, and I believe schools will be reopened in the next week or two. Good morning and welcome to the program. Well, first of all, I want us to demonstrate that we are properly socially distanced. We're not even able to touch each other. So don't you fear, guys. We are doing what we are asking you to do as well. Minister, good morning. And, it's probably a challenge. Definitely it's a challenge working now with COVID-19. We spoke about the new online learning. Tell us what's happening. I know that you put out the main points with the operational guidelines, right? So this week is orientation that's taking place.
For teachers.
Yeah.
It's very important that teachers get this time to orient themselves to this new normal. Of course, some schools and some teachers would have been more involved than some, but it's very important now that, as a team, the school understands its goal, its purpose, and if there are any teachers that need assistance at this time, they can feel free to say that and they can get what they need. So this is the time for teachers to really settle down, buckle down, and say, okay, we're doing this.
Yeah.
So in preparation for if they are starting next week.
Okay.
Depending on if some teachers need more time, next week is also open to this planning period. But next week is more planning and orientation with students and parents. So there are some schools who may be very set to go from next week and will start, but some may need a little more time, so they have until the 14th.
All right, and we were just speaking with Andre Charles, who's a teacher in the system, IT, and he was demonstrating, what online learning would look like. And, for some teachers, it's going to be intimidating. Is there any training that's taking place to help teachers navigate this new online method of teaching?
So there has been training going on since schools would have closed their doors in March, and that continues. So teachers have been able to do different aspects of online work, online training, online teaching, so that has been happening over the time. So teachers have been exposed to that. More will be exposed. The training is still available, and so the teachers have been able to have that resource available to them to assist them, because we know not everyone can just jump into the online environment, and so there's been quite a lot of training going on.
So we're talking about the students who can actually go online, but we know that there are some children who do not have devices, and they're talking about packages that you said that the teachers could prepare for the children. Does that make it an unlevel playing field for some of the children who have access to online versus those who have to work with the packages without that interaction with their teachers?
But it all depends on your level of discipline and commitment, honestly, because we have found that there are children who have access to all the devices and are not being engaged, not doing the work.
And not even logging on.
And not even logging on.
Yes, that's a valid point.
That's a fact.
Yes,
and then there are some who will be receiving their care packages. I'm calling them care packages because it's packages full of a teacher's attention.
Right.
And they can also interact with the teacher on the phone. So we can find different ways of making it work. Globally, once children cannot come online, that's the way you have to go to be able to give them some assistance. And it can work if the student and the parent are engaged with the teacher and are able to make that connection, so that if there's anything that is lacking, they are able to understand. And of course, we are going to be running from today the lessons that we're running on TV, so that students can also access those once it is matched to their content. And we'll be publishing the schedule later on this week so that parents and students can access that explanation as well. But it really speaks more to that connection between the student, the parent, and the teacher to get all of the learning that is possible.
I think you're raising a valid point there, because with this level of learning, you're talking about an opportunity to move into even new ways of teaching, pedagogy, and understanding. Interaction is so important. It's so critical to have that level of engagement with the children, even though they are at home. And I'd imagine that teachers would be exposed to how they can use this technology now to engage children in a different way. Is that being built into the system?
Yes, and that is part of the training that is available. And we will also be offering some guidelines for teachers who are preparing the printed packages, so that they would be able to also design what they send home
Yes.
in such a way that it is easy for children to understand, because it's not just printing out of something, it's also making sure they understand. And children also should have their textbooks available at this time. We ask that school provide children the book list so that parents also have a fallback and they are also able to access that as a resource.
Okay, you mentioned the book list, and we do have some questions that came in from the time we posted that you were coming. There were people who, and I appreciate that, on social media, who indicated that they wanted to have some questions answered. And one of it had to do with the book list and whether we're going to be looking at e-lists, e-books as well, now that people are migrating to online learning.
Yes, that is certainly the intention. I think it's been the intention for some time. We've been speaking in this country about e-books, and this experience certainly has allowed us to get into the space where we definitely are going to be moving towards the e-book. And so within the next couple of months, we'll be pursuing that option so that as we go into our next term, which we really hope will be a blended term, because that is the best way, where students have face-to-face as well as the online interaction, we'll be able to use that format for the books. We are not there yet, so as of now, we've asked schools to supply book lists so that parents can have a fallback with respect to making sure their children are exposed to enough material to be able to do the learning process.
And when you speak about blended learning, it brings up the topic of synchronous. We were speaking about that earlier as well, synchronous and asynchronous, interaction with the children. How much time should a teacher spend in front of the class online with their children versus the time that they would leave the children to work? Given the nature of the technology, children can go log on at any time and work, but how do teachers monitor that, and how are they expected to marshal that and know that children are actually working?
The asynchronous environment is good, especially for when parents are able to interact, because obviously parents are working. So it is important to have that aspect as well as the synchronous, so you can monitor the synchronous much easier. But the asynchronous, it doesn't necessarily have to be assessed. You can ask students a question in the next synchronous session about what you would have put for them to do, and you can see if they have done it. You can also build in a little assessment on it. You can say, I'm going to give you this is online for you, you have to do it, and in our next synchronous session, I'm going to give you a little quiz. So teachers can come up with different ways to ensure that students are engaged, and that's normal. You would give a home assignment, or you would tell children read something in a normal face-to-face class, and you would say, next time you come to class, we are going to be testing you on this. And that's asynchronous in the normal way.
But how are teachers meant to measure whether children do their work when they are not in the classroom, the formal classroom setting online? Is that going to be taken into consideration in terms of attendance and monitoring?
It must. Attendance is going to be taken every day by teachers. It must be, and submitted to principals. I can tell you that I myself have asked for a terminal report that deals with all of that, so that we can ensure students are engaged. It is very important for us to make sure that students are not missing from the classroom, just as when you have a normal class. So that is in place in terms of monitoring. And as I said, to make sure that students are engaged, make sure that students do what is left for them, teachers will, of course, have their methods to ensure that.
Yes. Let's shift gears a little bit, because we got some questions with regard to students who might be disabled or not inclined or not able to use the devices as other students. Perhaps because of some disability, they're not able to learn as fast online. Is that being taken into consideration?
So some of our students usually have aids, but with the situation with COVID, it's going to be difficult for the aids to directly interact with them in the way that they used to. So that itself in itself is going to have to be on a case-by-case basis, worked out. We do have requests from the special schools. They deal with children who have special needs, and we have requests for devices from them. And I can tell you that the ministry is taking a decision to assist those students first. We do have some devices available, and we are going to assist our children with special needs first. So we expect certainly by the end of this week that those children would be resourced based on the resources of the ministry with the devices that they have requested.
And I saw that you did visit some special needs schools over the past few days. What were some of the concerns that were raised in addition to devices?
Of course, the concerns of space, waiting lists, the concerns of the time that the students have in terms without aids. AIDS is one of the big issues because certainly quite a few of the students who are on the waiting list can actually get into regular schools, and I'm calling it regular, the normal secondary school and primary school. They can get into that environment, but they must have aids. So because they have not been able to get aids quickly, they of course are applying to the school for special needs. And so that I think has emerged as one of the major issues, the supply of teaching aids for the students. And so I have asked for a report on that, and we'll be looking closely at that process, because we understand that if we can supply more aids, then more of our children can get into the school system, which is the ultimate goal.
Yes.
Of course, the schools themselves, they have particular concerns about facilities and so on, also about teachers and the filling of vacancies. So that's another area that came out as an important thing to fill. And certainly the supply of devices for the students.
Which is a concern.
Which is a concern. So we are moving on that this week to ensure that the ministry's resources are used to supply the special needs students. So at least they will come first in terms of what we are able to supply students.
I want to tackle some of the questions from the public. I know you guys are looking, and one of the questions has to do with using creative ways, including theater, for example. Now that you have to be so much more interactive, whether you're teaching, I saw that some of the classes will be on channel 9 and 14.
4 and 16.
4 and 16 on radio, as well as, of course, online. Is there an opportunity for persons with a theater background to be part of the creating of lessons for students?
Certainly there is, but I want to assure the public that the teachers themselves are, many of them, very, very ready and raring to go.
Yes.
And the teachers do have very creative ways of doing things, of putting across lessons. I myself, I am a certified online teacher, so I remember doing all sorts of different things online to engage students. So I don't think there may be a lack of creativity on the side of the teachers who will be planning the individual lessons. And certainly, as we, from the ministry, give guidelines, certainly all of these things are part of what you would say to teachers. You can use this, but a teacher would craft a lesson based on the content, based on the class they're teaching, the level, and so on. And all of these things are, ways that we can use. So certainly, the use of theater, the use of song, all of these things come into teaching students in the online environment, as it is in the face-to-face environment.
We're really out of time. Time flew so fast, but I just want to get in just one more question maybe in. One of the concerns raised was that there might be homes where you have multiple children. You have 3 children, 1 device. And how does that work, and how is that expected to work if they're all attending different schools at different times?
It's important.
At the same time, one device.
It's important for a parent to indicate to the teacher when the child can be available and if they cannot be available online. And if the circumstances at this point are that you have one child that's going to use that computer online at that time, then they need to say to the teacher, the other 2 would have to get the packages, and they will log on and get use of any asynchronous material that is left there. So that it's very clear to the teacher what needs to be supplied to that home so that the students can be engaged. And certainly I would say the ministry is looking, the government is looking at supply, and we have had a lot of responses from our Adopt a School program. So we are looking forward to more students being able to benefit from devices.
Minister, I want to invite you once again a little later on in the program so we can get keep up with what's happening with the schools, because I think education is such an important ministry. We're talking about our children. So, we certainly want to have you again to see what's, how the progress is going on. But congratulations again on your new ministry, your new ministerial appointment, and thank you so much for coming and sharing this information with us. We're going to take in a few messages, and when we come back, we still have more here on the Now Morning Show. We're back, and I have convinced the minister to spend just another 7 minutes or so with us on set, because it's so important for us to ventilate this whole issue, and people have been sending in questions. SEA is one, it's already gone, but I saw where the ministry said that we can look forward to new things coming out. So we want to talk about what's happening with this current SEA group, and also what's your vision for the future with regard to SEA. So many people have been saying, it's such a weight on these poor children and their parents as well. So what's happening now and then the future?
Okay, so now results are expected on October the 8th, and certainly once results are out, then as in the normal way, the school will be in contact with the students, and they will put out their schedule for registration. In the same way that the first intake is being taken into ECCE schools now, primary schools, they are taking in their students. So the schools will plan the orientation and so on. And if it has to be online, most likely it will be online. And or teachers may be calling on the phone and so on to orient them and get them started into Form 1. So we can look forward then to, at least by the mid to end of October, the Form 1 students being formally brought into the system at their various schools.
Okay.
So that should be very, very reasonably done, because it's being done now for primary school as well as ECCE. With respect to SEA, we already indicated that SEA 2021 and SEA 2022 would have to be different compared to how it was for this year in terms of the narrowing of the curriculum, surely. So once the exam is still in train, certainly the curriculum will have to be narrowed, because we recognize that our standard 4 and 5 students would have gone through this time where we didn't have exposure to the normal teaching and learning process. And the timing of the SEA, the exam, once it is running, looking at having it later as it was for this year, maybe not as late as August, but certainly not as early as March, to account for the situation we have. And we certainly don't know what's going to be happening next term.
Yes.
With this pandemic and the course of it, no one knows what's really happening, but we're already thinking those thoughts and planning for that. So the SEA students now who are home just enjoying a little relaxation after that very grueling time they came through, we know that they can also access and see the material on the TV and online and so on, but they need their time to just relax.
But
and that will come
any thoughts to changing the system completely and looking at some of the systems that exist, for example, in Europe, and so we're in natural progression, because that weight that we place on children from such a young age to prepare for SEA from so young, and the parents, and it's just a whole traumatic experience for them. Any thoughts about looking at alternative ways for progression from primary school to secondary?
I think that's been a thought for a while in Trinidad and Tobago. I saw Barbados indicated that they are thinking about it now, and that I saw a lot of mixed responses, some good, some bad, based on that going that way as well. So it will have to be a consultation that takes place. We'll have to look at all angles, but certainly I don't think the door is shut in terms of thinking about that.
Yeah, and in terms of engagement now, let's go back to that level of interaction, even in terms of curriculum. So courses or training that involves critical thinking, problem solving, entrepreneurship, innovation. Any idea as to how that would be integrated into the learning, so that we have young people who are graduating who are more in tune with what the world right now is expecting of them?
Yes, well, you would have heard the Prime Minister lay out very clearly that he expects curriculum reform, he expects some measure of civics, and all of those things. There's a ministry now with responsibility for digitizing and that kind of function, and certainly we have already had an initial chat about how that we will feed that back into the education system and send it all down the ranks to ensure that our children, when they graduate, have those type of skills so that they can really function in the world of today.
Someone has asked about at risk, or at what we call on the show here at potential. We prefer to use the term at potential on the show. Communities, and in terms of online learning and learning in this new normal, is it meant to have any difference in terms of how it rolls out with the children from at potential communities?
In those communities and in schools that have many children that need extra attention, that is, it translates from the face-to-face classroom, and it will have to translate right into the online environment. What applies in the face-to-face applies in the online, and that's why it's important to have some synchronous sessions. I know some people are saying parents are working, why not put more into the asynchronous? The fact that you are putting a timetable out there that parents know, guardians know, and everyone is on board with that, it allows for accountability for the children. And that is very important for at potential children, that you have boundaries. You are supposed to be here at this time, and we are looking at you, we are monitoring you, your parents are involved, your teachers are involved, and so the child doesn't have that option to slip through the cracks. And that is as important as it is for face-to-face. It's just as
But
important.
parents have a
online.
responsibility there as well.
Parents
Very
have a
much. Because I know
responsibility.
of some teachers who tell me they have 130 children across the board and 6 children turn up online. That's a
Yeah.
reality, you know.
In the Education Act, the role of parents is enshrined. Parents have to take a role in their children. They have to take a supervisory role. They have to be interested. So the teacher has their role, and the school has a role, and the parent must have a role.
All right. Well, I think that's a superb note for us to end on in terms of bringing all the stakeholders together. We're all in this together as a
We are
country.
all in this together.
Definitely.
And if we work together, it will bring the maximum success for our children.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyan Gadsby-Dolly, for coming to us here on set this morning. And I want to thank you for your questions that you placed into our timeline. I trust that we addressed all the questions that you placed for us. And do stay with us. We have Shamla Maraj up next. It's unique, not different, because it's Tuesday. Back after this.